Welcome to the worst jobs in history explained using Minecraft. We will start with the least awful ones and work our way up to the most horrifying. Number 10. Leech Collector. Before medicine became modern, many doctors believed that removing blood from a sick person could help treat illness. This created huge demand for medical leeches. But leeches did not come from clean hospital shelves. Someone had to collect them from dirty ponds and wetlands, and this job usually fell to poor workers with few better options. The method was simple and disgusting. Leech collectors walked into the water with bare legs and waited. When the leeches attached themselves and filled with blood, the collector pulled them off and stored them for sale. The danger was easy to underestimate. Every bite left a small wound. Dirty water made those wounds easy to infect, and repeated blood loss could leave collectors weak if they had to do this again and again for money. Number 9. Tanner. Tanner's job was to turn animal skin into leather. It sounds like a useful craft, but the first stage of leather making was not clean craftsmanship. It was stopping dead skin from rotting. Fresh hides had to be scraped, soaked, and softened before they could become usable material. The work was heavy and disgusting because the tanner spent most of the day handling animal remains that were already starting to decay. To loosen hair and preserve the hide, tanners used harsh materials like lime and urine. These could burn the skin, irritate the lungs, and make the whole workshop unbearable to stand in for long periods of time. The job also came with constant small injuries. A tanner worked with knives and slippery hides in a contaminated environment, so even a minor cut could become infected. This was one reason tanneries were often kept away from cleaner parts of town. People needed leather, but nobody wanted the smell of making it nearby. Number 8. Rat catcher. Rat catching sounds like a simple job. Rats appear, someone catches them, and the city becomes cleaner. But old cities produced rats faster than any catcher could remove them. Rats gathered wherever food and waste were close together. That meant the rat catcher had to work in dirty cellars, storage rooms, and narrow alleys where the animals were only part of the problem. The obvious danger was getting bitten. Before antibiotics, even a small infected bite could become serious, but the places where rats lived were often just as dangerous as the rats themselves. They were wet, cramped, and full of contaminated waste. A rat catcher could clear one building and get paid, but that did not fix the reason the rats were there. If the street stayed filthy and food was still stored badly, more rats would return. The job was not really removing the problem, but instead giving a small time out to the people who paid for it. Sounds like a profitable business. Number 7. Chimney sweep. A chimney sweep cleaned soot from inside chimneys. The job sounds dirty, but in the past it was much worse because many of the workers were children. Small boys were used because they could fit into narrow chimneys that adults could not enter. They climbed upward through dark brick tunnels using their knees, elbows, and backs to push themselves higher. If the chimney was too narrow, they could get stuck. If the fire had not fully gone out, they could be burned. If too much soot fell while they were inside, they could suffocate before anyone pulled them out. Even when they survived the climb, the job damaged them slowly. They breathed soot every day, slept in filthy conditions, and often worked under brutal masters who treated them more like tools than children. The long-term effects were terrible. Constant exposure to soot caused breathing problems, skin disease, and one of the first known occupational cancers, later called chimney sweeps cancer. Number 6. Gong Farmer. Before modern sewer systems, human waste did not magically disappear. It collected in cesspits under houses, behind buildings, and beneath crowded streets. When those pits filled up, someone had to empty them. That job belonged to gong farmers. Despite the name, it had nothing to do with an Asian instrument. They climbed into pits of human waste, shoveled it into containers, and hauled it away, often working at night because the smell was too unbearable for daytime city life. The job paid better than many other dirty jobs, but there was a reason for that. One mistake could be fatal. Cesspits could release poisonous gases that made workers collapse before they had time to escape. The ground around the pit could break. A worker could slip, fall in, and drown in the same waste he was hired to remove. Disease was another constant danger. Every cut, splash, or contaminated tool could expose the worker to infection. And unlike many dangerous jobs, This one offered no dignity. A Gong Farmer kept the city functioning while being avoided by the same people who depended on him. Number 5. Medieval Miner. Medieval mining was one of the most dangerous ways to make a living because the workplace itself could kill you at any moment. A miner was working inside a tunnel carved through stone with very little light and almost no reliable way to know when something was about to go wrong. Most of the work was done by hand. Miners broke rock with simple tools, carried heavy loads, and trusted wooden supports to hold back the weight above them. If those supports failed, the tunnel could collapse without warning. A miner buried deep underground was not easy to rescue, especially when the same collapse blocked the people trying to reach him. The air could be just as dangerous as the rock. Underground spaces could fill with bad air, smoke, or toxic gases. Water was another threat. Mines could flood suddenly, trapping workers below the surface. Even miners who avoided disaster still spent years breathing dust, damaging their lungs, and wearing down their bodies in narrow, wet tunnels. Number 4. Powder mill worker. A powder mill worker helped make gunpowder for weapons, mining, and construction. The job was dangerous because the material they were making could become the thing that killed them. Gunpowder was made by grinding and mixing ingredients into a fine explosive powder. This created dust, and dust made the work even more dangerous. Loose powder in the air could ignite much easier than a sealed barrel sitting in the corner. Mills tried to reduce the risk by using wooden or copper tools instead of iron, because iron could throw sparks. Workers also had to keep flames away from the powder, which was not easy in a time when light, heat, and machinery were much harder to control. Some powder mills separated different stages of production into different buildings. This was made to prevent one mistake to destroy whole chain. When something went wrong, workers could be killed by the blast, burned by the fire, or buried under the building they had been working in moments earlier. Number 3. Whaler. Whaling was one of the most dangerous jobs at sea because the workers were hunting animals large enough to destroy the boat beneath them. A whaling voyage could last months or even years. The crew lived in cramped conditions, ate poor food, worked through storms, and spent long periods far from any help. But the most dangerous part began when a whale was finally spotted. The hunters lowered small boats into the water and rowed close enough for a harpooner to strike. If the whale dived or attacked, the boat could be dragged across the water at high speed, or whaler can be eaten and spend his life inside whale's digestive system. And even after the whale was killed, the work stayed dangerous. The crew had to process a massive dead animal on a moving ship, using sharp tools on slippery decks while surrounded by blood, oil, and seawater. People did this because whale oil was valuable. It lit lamps, lubricated machines, and made fortunes for ship owners. Number 2. Plague corpse collector. During major plague outbreaks, death became too common for normal burial work. Bodies were not appearing one at a time. They were filling homes, streets, and carts faster than cities could handle them. That was where plague corpse collectors came in. Their job was to remove the dead from infected houses and carry them to burial pits. It was work done in the middle of panic, often when nobody fully understood how the sickness was spreading. The danger was obvious, but the job still had to be done. A collector could enter a house where several people had already died, lift bodies that had been lying there for days, and then repeat the same work in another infected street. Protective equipment was primitive. They had nothing to do with plague doctors. These guys were just laborers. The physical work was brutal. Bodies had to be carried, stacked, and buried quickly before decay made the situation even worse. But the mental pressure may have been just as bad. These workers were watching an entire city lose control of death and wondering if they would be next. And unlike many jobs on this list, the danger did not end when the shift ended. If the disease followed the collector home, his work could become his family's problem too. Number 1. Radium dial painter. Radium dial painting, done by workers later known as the Radium girls, looks like one of the safest jobs on this list. The workers were not crawling through sewers, climbing chimneys, or hunting whales in the ocean. They sat in factories and painted watch dials with glowing paint. That glowing paint contained radium. At the time, radium was treated almost like a miracle material. It glowed in the dark, looked futuristic, and was used in clocks and glowing military watches that helped soldiers read the time at night. The painters, many of them young women, were told the paint was safe. Some even painted it on their nails or teeth for fun because the glow looked impressive in the dark. The most dangerous part was the technique. To make fine lines, workers were taught to shape the brush tip with their lips, dip the brush in paint, point it with the mouth, paint the dial, and repeat. Every time they did this, they swallowed a tiny amount of radioactive material. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Radium enters the body and behaves like calcium, so the body stores it in the bones. From there, it keeps slowly damaging the worker from the inside. Over time, the painters began suffering from anemia, bone pain, tumors, and teeth falling out. Some developed a condition later called radium jaw, where the jawbone became so damaged that parts of it could break away. The companies denied responsibility for years and tried to blame the workers' health problems on other causes, but the damage was already done. Many of the women were slowly dying from the same glowing paint they had been told was harmless.